Well, I think if I can wander around with this a little bit, I think for years, through most of my career, I was a clinician and a headache specialist in a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary program. And we were always betwixt about having to wait weeks and months with oral drugs before we could define efficacy for patients. And, it wasn't easy. There were often side effects that had to be managed. And, now that we have a drug that literally within the first day of infusion is providing efficacy to patients is quite amazing. And I do think it's a real change in the paradigm. And the way that, we first noticed this was back in our phase 2 studies. And what we did is we defined the percent of patients who were having a migraine on any given day during the run-in phase of the study, 28-day diary run-in phase. And then we looked at the day following their infusion, and we found that migraine frequency was reduced for the population by 50% for both the 100 and 300 milligram doses. And that was very exciting. The problem was that type of frequency analysis was not necessarily something that was on the radar for the FDA or others, because nobody probably really thought of looking at that. So we had discussion with the FDA, and they gave us some very good guidance. They wanted to look at day 0 and day -1. And we did that and showed the same benefit that was seen, both benefit, statistical benefit over placebo, and obviously over baseline. And it was really, that was kind of the backdrop to say, okay, what else could we do to support that? And so that's where we came up with this closed testing analysis. And the way this works, I mean, you probably know this, Matt, but I think many neurologists would be interested, is you go all the way out to your primary endpoint, which would be day 84. And at day 84, that was our primary endpoint, that 1 through 84. We had statistical efficacy over placebo for both doses, and in both studies, both the episodic and the chronic migraine study. And so for each of those studies, we then start subtracting 1-day intervals and then retesting each interval for continuation of that statistical validity. So you go from 84 to 83 to 82, etc. And the idea is that you keep backing up until you have a point where you no longer are statistically significant, and that would be the onset of your efficacy. And what happened in the case for both episodic and chronic migraine, and for both 100 and 300 milligram doses, is that we went all the way back to day 1, with every day being statistically, or every period, I can't say every day, but every period showing statistical significance over placebo. And so this is really saying that, when you think of the term onset of efficacy, typically you're thinking, where is the point where something begins to separate from placebo? But what happens here is that 50% reduction for the population is actually fairly flat and carries through all the way out to day 84. So you really are establishing the efficacy of Eptinezumab on that day following infusion.